This channel is supported by Truefire. Truefire is an online library
enough, you can get the Truefire All Access Pass for as cheap as they ever do it, the $99 thing. So just jump and do that if you're looking for the best price you can get Truefire All Access for.
One of the things that I think is kind of a little bit tricky around sort of guitar reviewing, I mean, even as just like a normal punter picking up a guitar and looking at them and all of this sort of stuff, is that we're told that essentially, like, a lot of the processes, no matter how much you pay for a guitar, are going to be pretty similar. And we're told that quite a lot of the grunt work these days is done by CNC machines. And the conclusion that I feel like I've been told by, varying people is that there's no reason necessarily that any one cheaper guitar should be, much worse than any expensive guitar, just based on people that know about some of these processes. So I wanted to do a little bit of a video just experimenting and looking at a few bits and pieces on a couple of guitars. So I've got here a Donner DST600 that they sent me about a year ago. Now this has not been, I've done nothing to it, and it's just lived outside for about a year. And I've also got Fender Vintera 60s here, which I bought from Project Music. And I think you might be surprised at some of the things I'll show you in this video, but this is nuts. So one of the key areas that I think you can still tell, or that I specifically hone in on a guitar when I'm looking at them and trying to determine, what's the kind of quality level here of workmanship, is the nut. There's something else to bear in mind that I've not really necessarily heard someone talk about specifically, is that the way that a guitar like this is made, I think you're going to have people working on like frets that specifically work on frets, and that's mostly what they do all day long, right? Or nuts. You get someone who's working on nuts who specifically works on nuts, like quite a lot of the time. Or, body assembly. That tends to be the way that factory guitars are made, right? And I think this might be a bit of an area that potentially they might even have some advantages against like a boutique guitar builder, just because you've got this kind of station thing going on, and say a boutique guitar builder, if they're really busy, might build 50 guitars a year. If they're really busy, they've done like 50 nuts. If you've got someone working in a factory, you're potentially going to have someone there working on the nuts who's really only doing nuts. I'm assuming this might be the way that things work. One of the ways that you get, better at a thing is by doing lots of it. So skill for skill, you might in a factory even get someone cutting nuts better than a boutique guitar builder. Just something to think about, unless they're doing their own sort of luthier work and like repair work as well, in which case that's obviously where you get people that are going to do quite a lot more nut work. Now, I did see a Warmoth video where they were kind of talking about their processes, and it actually shone a bit of light on this stuff for me. If you check out that video, I think it's called like Warmoth Fret Station or something like that, and it talks about how these things are made. So I presume Warmoth is making their stuff somewhat similar to like a bigger factory would. That's an assumption on my part, but what they specifically talk about, they talk about the guitars being play ready, but they don't do fine fretwork. And this is, I think, one of the things that actually Warmoth are pointing out that they don't do. I think you might find that this is probably more in line with the processes that happen in most factories, or a lot of factories, than not. And I think it makes a lot of sense. So what they will do is like polish the frets, maybe not even a fret level, but they'll polish the frets and they'll do like a bit of work on the fret ends. And I've had a Warmoth guitar that I actually took to a local luthier, Jeremy. I asked him actually, like, what is the hardest bit of like, building a guitar like a Strat or a Tele? He said it is the fretwork. Like, that's the area which needs most attention. Anyway, so yes, no fine fretwork, and this was actually something that now that I've seen it, I'm kind of shocked and surprised a little bit. But if you look at like this Fender Vintera up close, you'll see that the fret ends are not really. You could still see like sawing marks on them, I think. So you've not had someone go over and sort of take it through the grades and get rid of those fret ends. That's kind of surprising to me for £1,000 guitar. Anyway, so the nut part of things, the Warmoth thing also showed that there's this like CNC fret mill, and there were some things in there that looked familiar to me because I've seen guitars which have like a little bit of like where it's drilled through, like a little bit of the stuff still attached, and now I kind of recognise why I've seen that. So I think that's probably what's happening in a lot of cases with nuts, right? I don't think it's what's happening here. This is a bone nut on this guitar, and actually surprisingly looks very close to me to the sort of thing that you might get on a K-line guitar, or just like a well-cut nut, essentially. And I thought that was interesting because this is, again, not an expensive guitar in terms of how much you would pay for it, but you're getting quite a lot more sort of guitar for your money, if you know what I mean. So this nut here is not blocky, so typically like a cheap nut job, you'll see quite a tall nut which is high and maybe along this way. Another thing I'm really looking for when I look at nut is there a gap either side, because I can install a nut badly. A really skilled person that's got experience making nuts can like make it so it's airtight. And then the other thing that's going on is like I smooth these edges off, like shaping the nut. There's a really good Stu Mac video from Dan Irwin where he's actually rebuilding an old vintage nut on a Tele. That's worth a watch. But so this is, I think, let me know in the comments what you think, a pretty well installed nut, and that's on a very cheap guitar. Mostly fine, but probably what has happened on these types of guitars is you might have too much height. So these slots might have initially been slotted because they come like pre-slotted, but they might not have been filed down properly to be the right height. So this is the thing on cheaper guitars as well, or just guitars that haven't had this kind of, I guess, fine fret and fine nut work. You're going to have worse intonation close to the nut because this height is not great relative to this first fret. And again, this is why you might use a luthier. Here is an artist guitar, and here you see this is the sort of thing that I look for a little bit. Like the slot is again like slightly taller, sitting slightly higher above, and I think it looks like that one's actually been filed in though, so there's not just nut slots. Like that is a better installed job, I think. And again, so this is a cheaper guitar. The Donner is a cheaper guitar than the Fender, and I think actually, on balance, those nuts might be a better job. Do you know what I mean? It's interesting stuff to me. And again, look at the fret ends on this one versus the Fender here, which I don't know if I'll be able to get up close enough for you to really see this, but hopefully you can see, like, these are quite sharp. Like, maybe got a little bit of sandpaper over them after being clipped. Lastly, I wanted to read you this comment that I saw on a forum from a chap. I worked for a well-known luthier for a while. When someone brought in a guitar as set up from the factory, I was usually 100% confident I could make it play better than stock. The attention to detail just isn't there, even with expensive custom shop stuff, unless we get to something like a Collins. Those guys kill it. But also consider a lot of this stuff is adjustable. It's not meant to be perfect from the factory, as the guys at the factory don't know your preferences. I mean, you can't properly cut a nut unless you know what gauge strings are going to be used, and it's rare, if impossible, to find a perfectly cut nut on a production guitar. Keep in mind, all of these processes about removing material. The goal is to remove as little material as possible, yet have a playable instrument, which is again what Warmoth was saying. It's not fine fretwork, but it will be playable, which is again, I guess, what I see with a lot of guitars that I get to look at. Once you remove too much material, you can't add it back. You basically have to just start over. Now, is it a case of the manufacturer leaving that step for the end user, or just them trying to cut labour costs? I'd say it's probably a happy mix of both for them, a win-win. So I think that's a really interesting way to kind of point that out. But like the things that you'll notice on a more expensive guitar, or something that has actually had more time on it, whether that's related to cost or not, is that these fret ends, and this is what Sire have done so well, and that Donner guitar and these artist guitars are doing well versus what Fender have done there, is that they're taking a little bit extra like person time to go in and like just do a bit of fine fretwork. It's basically what I think they're doing. But that nut is still one of those areas where I kind of hone in on and say, you know, that's an area on a guitar where some attention is needed. It's like really skilled work if you see what Dan Elwin's doing on Stumac. But yeah, they seem to be up in the quality of fretwork on, you know, these cheaper Eastern guitars. Still, the nuts in this case, I think, down at the Mexican kind of level of Fender and that sort of stuff, I think both the fret ends and the nut probably could use some extra attention. But I guess the moral of the story is go to a luthier. Take any guitar to a luthier, you probably get a much better result. I played this like Warmoth neck for ages, stainless steel frets that had never really had much attention. Took it to Jeremy at Garland Guitars, and yeah, he just really improved this guitar for me all round, and it doesn't cost as much as a new guitar, and a new guitar still needs this work anyway, so it's kind of just, it's what it is. What do you look for when you're trying to ascertain whether a guitar is good value or not? And again, this is just kind of trying to get to this point where we're not just saying, well, like all of these guitars made in whatever way like this, they're all going to be the same as like just wood and wires. It's also like, you know, how much effort has been put into making this thing like perfect. And, you know, some factories do more of that than others. You know, still people at the end of the day doing quite a lot of these processes, so there's a lot of variability there. But it's not just the case that you know, every guitar should be like viewed as being basically the same thing. I don't think.